Hi all and welcome back to Next Stage Designs with me Sylvia. In today's video I'm going to show you how to crochet this very easy granny square which can be used for many projects. So for today's granny square, I will be using this beautiful Aran yarn and the color is plum. Also, I will be using this gray color, but you can use any colors you like or prefer. You will need a yarn needle. I will be using 5mm hook, pair of scissors and a tape measure. So we are going to start with this plum color and we will do round 1 and round 2 with the same color. First we are going to start with the magic ring. Hold your yarn and like so, wrap it around your 2 fingers and create a cross. Go under this first one, on top of the second one, pull it down and twist your hook and go back under this one here and pull through the loop you had on your hook, like so. And this is your magic ring completed. And this is your magic ring and a chain of 1. So we need to chain 2 more to have our first double crochet. Once we have our first double crochet, we are going to create our first cluster. When I say cluster, we will work 3 double crochet. So as this chain of 3 is counting as first one, I will work 2 more double crochet inside this magic ring. So I have 1 and 2. So altogether I have 3 double crochet. Next we are going to create our first corner. So we are going to chain 2. Again, inside this magic ring you will work your second cluster and we already know it's 3 double crochet, like so. Chain 2 for the second corner and turn your work like so. Work your third cluster, so 1 double crochet, 2 and 3, chain 2, and now we have 2 corners and this one is our third one, and we can close this ring a little bit. And now we are going to work our last cluster. So place 3 double crochet inside your magic ring like so. Chain 2 for our last corner. Pull this yarn end to close your ring completely, so there is no gap at all. Now we are going to slip stitch on top of this chain of 3 once you have chained 2 for your last corners. 1, 2 and 3, like so. Insert your hook and work your slip stitch like so. And this is your round 1 completed. For round 2 we are going to chain 3 again, and as you can see we will be working with the same plum color for this round 2. For round 2 we chain 3. Now for every even round or every other round you will start exactly the same. So we will leave this chain alone. We will work our clusters in each corner. Once we go all the way around, we will include this chain of 3 into the last cluster. So next we are going to work into this very first corner right here. Into this corner we will work our first cluster, so 3 double crochet, chain 2 for the corner, 1 and 2, and into the same space you will work another cluster. So again, place 3 double crochet into the same space. So we have cluster, chain of 2 and cluster. Now we will work like so in every corner, and in every corner you will do cluster, chain 2, cluster. Once we come all the way around, I show you how to finish this round 2. So now find the second corner and work 3 double crochet or cluster, chain 2 for the corner, and 1 more cluster into the same space. So again, we created our second corner for round 2. For the third corner, you will do exactly the same. Cluster, chain 2 and cluster. So 3 double crochet, chain 2 and 3 double crochet. 1, 2 and 3. So we created first corner, second and third one for this round 2. So we will finish this fourth corner a little bit different. So we will work cluster first. So 1, 2 and 3 double crochet, chain 2, and as I said at the start, we have this chain here. So we will work only 2 more double crochet to complete our last cluster. So we will include this chain of 3 into the last cluster. So now we will count 1, 2 and 3, and we will slip stitch on top of the chain of 3 like so. And this chain will be part of our last cluster like so, and you will work every other round like so. So this is round 2 completed. To finish this round 2, we are going to slip stitch into this space like so, and then chain 1, and now we are going to fasten off. So leave this yarn end longer so we can hide it later on, and cut it like this and pull through, and that's how you fasten off. Now we are ready for round 3, and I will be changing the color. For round 3, I will be using this gray color. So first and second round we done with this plum color. The third round will be with this gray color. So for this third round, I'll be attaching this gray color. So simply just insert your hook into the same space where you slip stitched and fasten off. Now simply just tie like so. Leave this end longer so you can hide it later on. Insert your hook and chain 3 like so. Move it a little bit. And now we will be placing our first cluster, so we will place 2 more double crochet to have our first cluster completed. Into this first corner you will work cluster, chain of 2 and cluster. So each corner will be always the same. So place cluster, chain 2 and cluster, and you will always work on your corners exactly the same way. Cluster, chain 2 and cluster. Now we are working on the side and we have only one space on the side, so in that space you will work cluster, and then we will move to other corner and we will do it exactly the same way. Cluster, chain 2 and cluster. So place your cluster, 3 double crochet, 1, 2 and 3, To complete our first cluster, chain 2 and one more cluster into the same corner. So we have one corner and then second corner completed. Now we are on the side again. As you can see, we have another space in the middle. So in that space you will work cluster. 3 double crochet, 1, 2 and 3. Next we will work on our corner again. So we will have cluster, chain 2 and cluster again. Chain 2 and into the same space. We already know our corners will always look the same. Cluster, chain 2 and cluster. Now we are on this side. As you can see here, we have space. In that space you will work your cluster. Now we have this last corner. Place cluster, chain 2 and cluster. And we are finishing this round 3. You can move this knot slightly so it's not visible, closer to your cluster, like so. And now we are going to slip stitch on top of this chain of 3. So 1, 2 and 3. Simply slip stitch like so to complete our round 3. Now we are going to chain 1 and this is our round 3 completed with this gray color. For round 4 we will be changing the color again and we'll be using this plum color. So as I chained 1 already, I am going to leave this yarn and longer and fasten off like so. And we are ready to start round 4. This round here. For round 4, bring this plum color, insert where you slip stitched and fasten off, pull it through like so and create a knot. Leave this yarn and longer again so you can hide it later on. Now, as you remember, at the start I said every second round or every even round we will start exactly the same way as we started round 2. So we have 1, 2 and 3 and this one is our 4th round. So we will repeat exactly what we did in this round 2. So as you remember, we chain 3 first and this chain we will leave alone. We will work our way all the way around. Once we come here, we will include this chain of 3 into our last cluster. And as your square get bigger and bigger on each side, you will get more of these spaces on each side. So here, here and here. But the corners will be always the same. So you will always work cluster, chain 2 and cluster. But after each round, you will get more of these spaces on each side. So let's start round 4. We already chained 3. Now we will work into this very first space here. So work your cluster. 1, 2 and 3 double crochet. Now work your corner. And we already know corners are always the same. Cluster, chain 2 and cluster, all into the same space or corner. Now we are on the side and as you can see we already have 2 spaces on each side. In the next round we will have 3. In the next round we will have 4 on each side and so on. So you can go as big as you like. So we will work cluster into the next space on the side. You will work another cluster. as you need to always work cluster in each space on each side, but the corners we know it's a cluster. Chain 2 and cluster. Now we are on the side again, and you already can tell on each side we have 2 spaces, so you need to have 2 clusters on each side. So 1 cluster here, 1 cluster here. So work your cluster in this space. 1, 2 and 3 double crochet, and then cluster into the next space on the same side. Now corner the same way as we did before, cluster, chain 2 and cluster. So corners will be always the same, but after each round, as your square gets bigger and bigger, you will have more spaces on each side, so you will need to place clusters in all those spaces. So again, place cluster here in this space and cluster into the next space. And now you need to do corners. So we have done 1, 2 and 3, and we need to finish this last 4th corner. So cluster, chain 2 and cluster. And as you remember, we will finish it the same way as we did in round 2. So we left this chain alone, we went all the way around, and now we will work on the 2 more double crochet in this space, and we will include this chain of 3 which we left at the start into our last cluster. So simply slip stitch on top of this chain of 3 like so. So we included this chain of 3 into our last cluster. Now slip stitch into the space, chain 1, and we are going to fasten off. So this was our round 4. Now leave this yarn end longer and pull through and fasten off. Round 4 is completed. Next round we will change the color again for this gray color. So for this last round I will be working with this gray color. So insert your hook, pull the yarn through. I'm using this gray one, and simply work your knot nice and tight, leave it longer so we can hide it later on. Now for this round 5, as it is odd round, we will start with the cluster. So insert your hook, chain 3, this chain of 3 is counting as our first double crochet, and we will work 2 more double crochet into the same space to create our first cluster, like so. And every odd round you will start exactly the same with a cluster in the space. And you can already see again, as our square is getting bigger and bigger, we have more spaces on each side of our square. And of course, in those spaces you will need to place 1 cluster for each space, but the corners will be always the same: cluster, chain 2 and cluster. Now for me this will be last round, but for you, if you want to create different project, for example blankets, scarves or ponchos, you can continue working on your squares for as big as you like. And as your square gets bigger and bigger, you will get more and more spaces on each side of your granny square, but the corners are always the same. So let's complete our last round, round 5. So I have done the cluster here. Now I'm going to find the next space and work my cluster again. And now the corner, we already know it's a cluster, chain of 2 and cluster into the same space. So we have our corner completed. So we are on the second side now, and you can see I have more of these spaces. I have 1, 2 and 3. So in each of those spaces I will work one cluster. So one cluster in this space, one cluster into the next space, and one cluster into the next space. Now the corner again, and we already know corners are always the same. Cluster, chain 2 and cluster. Now we are on this side now, and remember, in each of those spaces you will need to place one cluster each. So we are on the third side, and again I have 3 spaces, so I will place 3 clusters, one cluster per space, and then corner again. So we are here 1, 2, 3. Now we are in the corner again, so cluster, chain 2 and cluster. Oopsie daisy. So one more cluster into the same space to complete our corner. Now we are on the side again, so we need to finish this side, and we have again 3 spaces. So in each space place one cluster, one into the second space, second cluster, and into the third space, third cluster. And your last corner will be cluster, chain 2 and cluster. And now we are back on the side 1, or on the first side. So we'll just do the cluster here, and we will slip stitch on top of this chain of 3 of our first cluster. So 1, 2 and 3, insert your hook and slip stitch like so, chain 1, and we are ready to fasten off. Leave this yarn and longer again so you can hide it later on. And I am going to stop here because I am going to use this square with 5 rounds for my next video, where we'll be creating kimono style poncho. And for the poncho, you will need to make 40 of these squares. So once you have your squares done, you will hide all your ends, and in the next video I will show you how to sew your poncho together. But as I said at the start of this video, this granny square can be used for many different projects. So you can work on your square for as big as you like, and remember the corners are always the same, but the bigger your square will get, or the more rounds you will do, the more spaces you will get on each side. Of course, you can change the colors the way you like or prefer for your project. And also you can use any yarn you like or prefer. It's totally up to you. So just basic rules are corners are the same, and the bigger your square gets, the more spaces you will have to work on each side. So if you enjoyed this tutorial, please don't forget to like it, share it, and of course don't forget to find me on social medias. I am on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and TikTok. Thank you very much for watching.